There's something called the fiscal cliff approaching. And we must do something about it or we will go over a cliff. But if you want to fix and do something about going over a cliff, you got to know what is the fiscal cliff. Well, the fiscal cliff apparently is taxes going up. So it must be a bad thing if your taxes go up. People have said, well, it's kind of like having people drowning. And people are drowning. Well, what does that mean? That's a bad thing. Taxes going up is a bad thing. So what are they telling us? Let's save 98 out of 100 of them. Well, that sounds pretty good. I'm for saving as many as we can. But that sort of implies that our policy is that drowning is a good thing. That we're going to let 2% drown. That raising taxes is bad if it happens to everyone. It's a cliff. But it's okay if it only happens to one or two people, and maybe you don't know them, and maybe they're rich people and we don't care. But anybody work for rich people? Anybody know somebody who works at a car lot selling expensive cars, but that person only makes $40,000 a year, but he sells cars that are purchased by rich people? Anybody ever remember the yacht tax? We were going to go get those rich people. They had a special tax on yachts. Guess who lost their jobs? The working guy making $50,000 and $60,000 a year making the yachts, because the rich people went to the Bahamas to buy their yachts. This isn't about getting rich people. This is about what it will do to the economy, what it's going to do to the average middle-class person who works for a rich person. But you have to understand what the fiscal cliff is. You have to understand that the president is telling you that it's a cliff and it's bad, and everybody on television thinks it's terrible to go over the cliff. What is the cliff? Taxes going up. But if it's bad for taxes to go up for a bunch of people, why is it good for taxes to go up only on a small portion of people? You say, well, they're rich, they can afford it. Here's the problem. The rich pay most of the taxes in our country. The top 2% pay half of the taxes. So what you're saying is they're rich and they can absorb it, but that's half of the nation's income will have increased taxes. You will take money from the productive sector, which is the private sector, and you will put it into the non-productive sector, which is Washington. So if you want ditches to be dug and then to be filled up again, send more money to Washington. But if you want jobs to be created, if you want the economy to thrive, you should want to leave that money in your community. It shouldn't matter to you whose money it is or who has it. You want that money, in my case, we want that money in Kentucky. We don't want to send it to Washington because there's no objective evidence that the money is well spent up here. There's no objective evidence that we are good with money up here, so we shouldn't send more money up here. We should leave more money in the private sector. Now, Milton Friedman recognized this when he said, nobody spends someone else's money as wisely as you spend your own. That in a nutshell, that in one sentence, explains to you why the private sector is more efficient than the public sector. The public sector, it's not our money. It's not their money. So those of up here who will spend it, that's why they spend $1 trillion more than they have each year. That's why they break their own budgetary rules. That's why there's no budget. That's why we live in an era of runaway spending. That's why your government is insolvent, your government is bankrupt, and guess what? When you raise taxes on 2% of the people, there's a chance you don't get any more tax revenue. Because when you raise tax rates, you sometimes get less revenue. And the converse is true. Sometimes you lower rates and you actually get more revenue. In the 1920s, we lowered tax rates and we got more revenue. And guess what? The rich paid a higher percentage of the revenue when we lowered rates. We did it again in the 1960s under Kennedy. We did it again under Reagan. We grew at 7% one year under Reagan because we lowered rates and we unleashed an economic boom. That's what you want. Do you want a government that just is envious and jealous and wants to punish people? Or do you want a government that has sane and rational policies that allow the economy to grow? That's what happened in the 1980s. We had 7% growth one year. We had millions of jobs created. Mark my words, you will raise tax rates and you'll feel good because you went after and you got those rich people because you said you were, you campaigned against rich people, and you got enough envy whipped up in the country, and you're going to get them, you're going to stick it to those rich people. But guess what? You may not get any more revenue, you may not get any more economic growth, but you can say, I stuck it to the rich people. That's what we're talking about. And some of you may say, well, we're going to do this, but maybe we'll do something about spending at the same time. The one thing they've taken off the table is spending restraint. There will be no spending restraint. In fact, whatever deal comes out of here will increase spending. That's part of the deal. We're going to raise taxes and we're going to raise spending. Tell me what's good about that. There is a cliff approaching. It's not the cliff you hear about on TV. The cliff is a debt cliff. There's a debt crisis in our country. We now have a debt that equals our GDP. Our debt equals our economy. We are borrowing, while we're today dithering over a deal that will do nothing, we will borrow $4 billion today. We are borrowing $50,000 every second. Each man, woman, and child in this country owes more per capita in debt than they do in Greece. So by all means, let's complete a deal today so we can go home. Let's complete a deal. Let's raise taxes. Let's stick it to those rich people. Let's not touch spending, and let's pretend as if we've done something. The deal will do absolutely nothing to save this country. 2/3 of your spending up here is entitlement. The President's taken entitlement off the table. We will not reform the entitlement programs. Why are the entitlement programs broken? Is it Republicans' fault or Democrats' fault? No, it's your great-grandparents' fault. They had too many kids. It has nothing to do with partisan politics. There were a whole bunch of babies born after the war, and then there have been less babies born with each generation. It's nobody's fault, but it's not working. We spend more on Social Security than comes in taxes. That's a problem. On Medicare, it's even worse. We spend $3 for every dollar you collect in Medicare. Anybody think that's going to work? It's been going on for a long time now, and it's getting worse. We owe $35 to $40 trillion on Medicare, and it's not getting any better. And so what are your retirement groups? AARP says absolutely don't touch it. Oh, that's great. That's part of the solution. Don't touch it. What's the president say? Entitlements off the table. What does the majority leader say? We won't do anything about entitlements. Oh, well, great. This is going to be a real great solution. We're really going to do a lot, but we're going to stick it to rich people. Hope nobody works for any of these rich people. Hope nobody sells any of this stuff to rich people. So the thing is look at what's going on up here, and when you ask for action, don't ask for any action. We have to figure out what the problem is before we can get to what we need to do. People say, well, we've raised taxes, we just need more revenue. Spending as measured as a percentage of your economy, 4 years ago we were spending 20% of our GDP. We're now spending 25% of our GDP. So when we say on our side that it's a spending problem, it absolutely is. It absolutely is, and it's out of control. And guess what? Most of it is called mandatory spending. That means entitlements. You can't do anything about it. They're now taken off the table. Now, about a year ago, you may have remembered, there was this big debate, the Budget Control Act, there was this big debate over raising the debt ceiling, and they attached to it some slowdown in spending. Now, these were not cuts. The sequester is not a cut in spending. It's repeated all the time on TV that the sequester is a cut, but it's not a cut. It's a slowdown in the rate of growth, but it's at least going in the right direction. So what's the one thing that we hear now that's going to be part of this deal? We're going to get rid of the sequester. So the one even pretend, make-believe attempt to try to slow down spending, they're going to jettison it. They're going to kick the can down the road, but we're going to get those rich people. We're going to tax those rich people. We have to wake up soon as a country. We really, literally are insolvent. And some say, well, we're a great and powerful country. Bad things could never happen to us. It can, and it has happened to great civilized countries. Do you know what they do? Great and civilized countries can destroy their currency. We have printed trillions upon trillions of dollars, and we're in danger of destroying the very value of your currency. So instead of having a president who runs around saying he's going to stick it to rich people, what we really need are honest people to go around the country and say to people, if you are working class or you are retired, the government is stealing from you. The government is stealing your savings through big government. So on the one hand, they offer you something. They offer you baubles. They offer you something for free. Here's a cell phone. Just take the cell phone and vote for me. It'll be okay. The problem is it's not free. On the one hand, you get the free cell phone. On the other hand, you get $4 gas. On the other hand, you get food rising. Why do prices go up? Because we run a deficit up here, giving you free stuff, and then we print up money to pay for it, and that steals value from what you have. It's not that gas is more precious. Gas is rising because the value of your dollar is shrinking. Food is rising because the value of your dollar is shrinking. So big government isn't your friend. Deficits are not your friend. And we hang in the balance up here, and nobody is serious about it. What's the one thing that's been taken off the table? Spending. We will not cut any spending. So we're looking for a deal that will raise taxes, which everybody seems to equate with drowning, except we're only going to make a few people drown and they're rich anyway. But I think drowning is a policy. Drowning, even if it's selective drowning, being in favor of selective drowning is not a good policy. So what I've asked, and what I ask people is, let your representatives know, let your senators know that you'd rather have some kind of serious fix to the problem rather than kicking the can down the road. You'd rather have them actually do something that would allow the economy to grow, would allow jobs to be created, and as a consequence, government would bring in more revenue. The only thing proven to ever bring in more revenue up here, economic growth. What's going on right now? We're growing at a little under 2%. When the president 2 years ago extended all the tax rates and chose not to raise tax rates, we were growing faster. And he said, we don't want to rock the economy, and he agreed to extend all tax rates. But now, I think he's hell-bent on raising taxes. So realize that what you're going to get is raising taxes, more money taking out of the private sector and given to government, the inefficient sector. Don't count on that new money coming in going to make the debt smaller. Count on it funding more programs. You'll notice, if you look carefully at whatever this fiscal cliff deal is, that there won't be spending cuts, but there will be spending proposals. So we're going to try to tax rich people more and get more money. May not work, because often you raise rates and get less revenue. We're going to try that, but we're going to take the money that we get from rich people and we're going to immediately spend it on more foolhardy programs, what we've been doing up here. So we're not going to fix the problem, we're going to perpetuate the problem. So what I would argue for is we should be doing the opposite. We, the Republican Party, the party of limited government and low taxation, should have no part in this. We should have no fingerprints on this, and we should in no way support anything that raises taxes because it's bad economic policy. So I, for one, will not support any proposal that comes out that does not cut spending and raises taxes. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield back my time and suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.